Welcome. Welcome to the Tom School of Life Weekly Update. I am your Community Director, Kevin Dolan. We are here with the facilitators, Barbara Williams, Jeremy Evans, and David Moore. And Barbara wanted to talk a little bit today about imposter syndrome and what she's seeing in the group as far as when all you have to assess the value of what you contribute is sort of your own internal monologue and your hyper self-criticism. It can be really tough to move forward, but when you have a group of people to like tell you that, like, hey, no, actually that idea is good, or that idea is crap. Like, maybe that idea is crap, but this idea is good. That can be really valuable. So what put you in that frame of mind this week, Barbara?
Well, there were a couple people on the last couple calls that I've had that have been hesitant to start their own thing, whether it's a YouTube channel or some project, because there are other examples of that thing already out there. And something that I would love for people to remember, and the thing that I always say the moment I hear it at any call, is to remind people that the special ingredient is you. Like, you bring your experience about it, your perspective on whatever topic that you have to share. People are going to watch you. And if they like you, they will keep watching you. And I love to use actually the three facilitators here as an example. You know, me, David, and Jeremy, we are very different flavors. No one's better or worse. We are just so different. And we provide a very different experience for our groups as a result. In the same way, everyone providing, you know, their flavor of whatever their expertise is online should feel free to do that, because I think it's important and we need those voices out there.
Yeah. So who are you seeing that's running into that? Or I guess maybe you don't want to talk about specifics, but like, how are you seeing people get help in the group with that?
Well, the one-on-ones with each other. I have two consultants basically that got on a one-on-one call in the last week, and one is doing a YouTube channel and has a lot of stuff going on. He recently raised his rates with his clients, got them on retainer. He's killing it. So I set him up. I told him to talk to another consultant in one of my other groups who is struggling, because he realized his hourly rate is actually quite low, especially when you factor in commissions on these platforms that he's on and all that stuff. So the two of them had a great talk, and I think it gave the second person more perspective as to, like, okay, this is actually doable. This guy's doing it. He's killing it. I'm going to try to replicate that in some way. So I'm seeing that as definitely encouraging people to share amongst each other, talk about this. I always encourage this kind of discussion within the group calls too, as well, if we have time. I don't know. Are you guys seeing some of that too?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I sometimes bring up my own story of starting out and being just kind of crazy, right? Just saying, hey, I am a web developer with no background. And then going and finding clients and being a rather lackluster web developer with no background, and then improving over time. That's a long way from where I am today, right? That was a long time ago. And what you said about the one-on-ones, I think there's a lot of value to having that proximity. So if you can connect one guy who says, yeah, I'm not sure, you know, I've done this at my day job for 30 years, which is, by the way, the most common thing. I've done this for 30 years. You know, I'm nothing. I don't know anything. I've just done this for 3 decades. I mean, who am I? Which, by the way, maybe your employer relationship is a little wanting there, if that's your impression after being hopefully an expert in your field.
Well, sorry,
please.
Not to interrupt. I was just talking to a guy who he did like a decade in counterintelligence, and now he's like a big wheel in that group. And he's like, and now here's the truth of it. He feels like he was refined into a replaceable part in that particular machine, like a specialized component. And he's like, I don't know how my experience, I know a ton about, like, and I had the same experience in like defense finance. Like, I'm a great fit for this particular company's earned value management financial reporting system. Mm-hmm. I know some things about that, but I have no idea how that translates or how that's useful to anybody outside. And I think that's one of the ways that these corporate employers, I don't think they do it like deliberately, but they sort of collude, because my options are, well, I can either do this job for Lockheed, or I can do it for Raytheon, or I can do it for General Dynamics or Northrop. But those are the options, and their benefits are all identical. Their salaries are all identical. So it's like, it's how do you pull apart the components of what you're good at so that they can become yours, instead of being this sort of proprietary possession of your employer.
And to become a bit more of a generalist, I think one of the values of the calls is to explore how you're consultative, right? So you may have this thing for which you're called upon in your corporate job every day, the same type of work. But now you're being asked to stretch outside your comfort zone, outside of your, standard lane of competence on a regular basis, and you're being exposed, and it's kind of like ever expanding this kind of bubble or sphere of competence. And you can do that on a weekly basis by being asked to give advice on things that are maybe just an inch further out each time. And you're starting to notice where you're helpful, where you lean in, what are the problems that you tend to speak up about, and what are the ones that you tend to refrain from. So if you can kind of be a bit of a historian.
All right. David, we lost you briefly. We'll cut and recover. I 100% agree that a huge portion is finding the perspicacity. That's your $15 word for today. We do have an ongoing count for how much money we're spending on our words. Or the perspective maybe is another one, but it's a combination of perspective and perception, which is the ability to perceive your talents in a more raw form. And then the perspective rather, to apply those into different lines of business. I think the simplest path, the pipeline here is, I'm a technical expert in a narrow field. What can I pull away from my years and years of experience, and then turn that into consulting? Consulting is, for most people who are accomplished and storied in their careers, is a very direct path. I've seen that hundreds of times before play out, not always successfully. But I think that we have the tools. I personally have helped a lot of people to do this. We have the tools to help people transition to a good consulting career. The companies themselves have no perceived incentive to have you be intrapreneurial and to take responsibility and accountability for your work. This is kind of a new wave of business management thinking, which has been in the works for decades. I'm not sure if it will ever reach fruition. But there is a line of reasoning that the most effective organization has a variety of stewards, that's borrowing from Stephen Covey, or entrepreneurial managers who own their production and their department. That's borrowing a little bit more from Michael Gerber and his management style. If you are so blessed to be in such a situation, you're not going to have apprehensions and imposter syndrome. You're going to say, right, I own this department. I own my work. I know both ends of it. Here's the input. Here's the output. I bring them together, and that's what I do. And I could do that anywhere. And that's part of the danger for a corporate employer of having you do that, right? You know exactly where you fit, and you know where you can go elsewhere. And you know that you can tweak the input or the output by X and achieve a similar result that's highly paid. Back to a long time ago, because I got paper and I got a train of thought, and we got Dagny Taggart at the station. Kevin is actually reading Atlas Shrugged right now. That's phenomenal. I forgot about that.
I am.
The proximity to somebody who's had this transformative experience of going from either working in a job for a long time or being in some different field, et cetera, and transitioning hopefully successfully with whatever modicum of success that is into being independent is really, really valuable, because they're psychologically, emotionally, there are many things that manifest and come up in this process. It's an expansive transformation that requires you to personally accommodate all these new areas and disciplines, whether or not that's dealing with finances for the first time, if it is measuring the efficiency of your operations, if you're managing other people, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, the beauty is we churn out somebody who starts a business successfully probably once a month.
Yeah.
Something like that. And you can probably connect with somebody who has been there really, really recently to give you that insight and encouragement. Now, I'm not sure if that addresses the very root of imposter syndrome, which may be, and I'm speculating a little bit because I have distance from it, a sense of personal inadequacy. So if somebody else comes to me and says, well, I'm successful, if in my experience, usually they're just too far for me to visualize myself there. And that's a skill, by the way, is to look at others with respect and admiration as opposed to jealousy or inadequateness.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that, yes, it's a good issue to touch.
I've definitely seen people get a lot of value from talking to someone who is at the destination they want. And I've definitely seen people get a whole different set of value from talking to somebody who's 2 steps ahead.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I know what it's like to set up the LLC, and I know what it's like to be like not really paying myself a salary for a year or so, and the challenges that go with that. And, and the mistakes that I'm making right this minute still feel really fresh, because you forget things about where you came from. I'm still new enough in the game that, like, when people tell me about the soul suck of cubicle life, I feel like it's very fresh. And I know exactly.
I have no memory of that. I don't remember my childhood either. That's probably for unrelated reasons. We'll cover that in detail.
That's called trauma. No. No, I would say for people who are experiencing imposter syndrome, the people that I've encountered, chances are if they're experiencing it, they're probably not awful. Like, the fact that you have enough awareness to be worried about that, I think is a good sign that you're doing something right. I don't know that it comes from comparing so much externally as much as it might just feel like a lack of confidence or not being ready. Weirdly, I have one of these little inspirational calendar things on my desk, and today it says great people do things before they're ready, and I feel like that was appropriate, so I am saying that today.
I think a great video on this topic is Kevin, I think you mentioned it before as well. It's Ira Glass on taste.
I was just pulling it up, actually.
That. Yeah, I love that one.
You guys know that one?
That comes from, because go ahead. Yeah.
Can I read it? Okay, I was pulling it up right as you said that. Nobody tells this to people who are beginners. I wish someone told me. All of us who do creative work, and I think this actually applies to almost everything. Mm-hmm. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste, but there is this gap. For the first couple of years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase. They quit. Most people I know who do interesting creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have this special thing that we want it to have. We all go through this. And if you're just starting out or you're still in this phase, you got to know it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is do a lot of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week you'll finish one story. It's only by going through a volume of work that you will close that gap, and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And I took longer to figure out how to do this than anyone I've ever met. It's going to take a while. It's normal to take a while. You've just got to fight your way through. And I mean, that was life-changing for me when I first heard it. It's such a great quote. And I think it's not just creative. It's basically because your sense of inadequacy, I think you're right that it's not just about comparison. It's about you take the problem so seriously. And the more you, it's sort of like everybody's a conservative about what they know best. Like, the more you understand about a given problem, the more you realize that it's not solved yet because it's freaking complicated. And like, when you're talking about somebody already, like, there's already somebody in the game working on this, you're thinking like, well, surely if there's already somebody in the game, like they're smart enough and they've thought it through, and like, what can I contribute? What can I add to this really complicated problem? And I think that there's a balance between there's so much value in like just being around really high flying people, really successful people, because you will learn, like they do have skills and mindsets, and there are things about them that are different from people who do not achieve those things. But you also get to see like they put their pants on one leg at a time, and they're not all smarter than you. They don't all have just more like some raw brain power or agency that you couldn't activate. I talked to a guy, or we had a group call last week. I wanted to help the guys to see some of that. And so I brought on a couple of people who had succeeded. I brought on one guy who had raised 6 figures within the group to finance a project. I brought in a guy who had started a pretty sophisticated like software project with no codability himself. He had came to the group just with the idea, and he had found his technical co-founder and his like business and project management co-founder. Like he was just the ideas and the creative. But he was able to make a compelling enough case to attract some really high value talent inside the group. And one of the things that was so interesting about his story was that like he came to me with his idea. And I'll be honest with you, I thought maybe you're the kind of guy who can do it. I don't necessarily believe in you. Like, I don't know that you're going to do it because I just met the guy. And what you find happens with some of these guys who are like, and ladies in the group who are achievers, is they have this like flat notion of how capable they are. And it starts out, I've just met them. I have like no confidence in their ability to execute because I haven't seen them. But my confidence in their ability is just going up and up and up because I'm seeing them perform, I'm seeing them deliver. And they think that they're the same person they've been the whole time. And so one of the values of having, letting people into your process, letting them watch you work, is they can tell you in a way that you can't tell yourself. Like, why am I the guy to do this, or the gal? Why is this something that I can contribute to that nobody else is doing?
I will say I have the opposite problem, and maybe I'm naive about it, but I believe in people right away. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. They've got to work to get me to not believe it. I'm like, oh, never mind, I was wrong. But for the most part, so if you need someone to believe in you right away, man, come to me. I'll just be like, you can do anything, buddy. Anyway, I just thought that was a funny difference.
I think I look for industriousness, right? Industriousness is a pretty good predictor. Sure. You know, do you work or do you watch TV? I'm sure people watch TV. I've been watching Attorney Woo.
Sorry, right. There's a high percentage of industriousness in this group.
Right, absolutely. Gym pop. Yes, I agree. That's one of my favorite things. Is this is actually okay. Now I found my imposter syndrome. It took the entirety of this, but I have people come to me all the time and say, "Look at these other people. They're so successful. They have businesses. They have millions in revenue. What am I doing here? I'm a child. I'm an idiot. I'm too old, et cetera, et cetera." And I say, already, by being here and committing to do something in addition to a full-time job, how many people do you know that are willing to do that, to make the commitment, to even try something beyond what they're currently doing after 40 hours a week, other than drink wine and watch television, right? Yep. Yeah. You're in the top decile, at least. I think you could very well be in the top 1% of industriousness right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm. And I think if you will, if a person like that will make a commitment that's not like, I almost think there's like an embarrassment that's valuable. Like make a commitment that's aggressive enough that you won't be embarrassed to make it to the group. And then feel a little bit of tension to come back and say, I didn't do it. Like, I think there's tons of value in that. And like, it takes all kinds, right? There are people who do, their feelings of inadequacy are so strong that they need someone to pump them up right away. And that helps them achieve. And I think there are other people who need to be told, like, hey, you could have done that. That was not a tough lift. Like, nut up, you know? And I don't know if we can say that on the pod, but
We just did.
I'm
I honestly have never heard that before. I'm impressed.
I have.
You have?
You're Googling
Yeah.
it? You're Googling it?
No,
Oh,
I mean,
Google
I'm
that.
visualizing.
Definitely Google
I have
that.
a very vivid imagination. I'm conceiving exactly what it means. I thought that, I didn't even know that was the man's role necessarily. I thought that was
Jeremy's conceived.
Yes, exactly. Kevin, prodigious as always. Prolific, perhaps. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I ran out of budget after Perspicacity.
Yeah.
I want to add here briefly.
Okay,
I think objectivity is an important start. If you have emotions about yourself, I suspect you do, dear anonymous listener, you might have emotions about yourself, and they might distort your perception of yourself as opposed to how other people perceive you. And then maybe even how other people perceive you in the collective, in the aggregate, averaged out, which is maybe even a little closer to objectivity. I don't think objectivity cures sense of inadequacy or lack of confidence or anything, but I think it's a start. You know, I do not enjoy necessarily broadcasting myself in this context and pretending that I'm some sort of oh, maybe I have imposter syndrome. Oh, that's awesome. We figured it out. I have imposters. No, who knows?
We're in it right now. This is it. This is
right.
So meta. Breaking through.
But it's I have to defer to the stats, and that's a absolutely essential thing in marketing. It's an essential thing in any business, because when you're looking at your profit and loss, you have to defer not to your feelings or your intuition, which are valuable and important things, but you should at least know at some level, here is where I am objectively. And then from there, maybe you can adjust and accumulate enough confidence, emotion to be able to bring your subjective level up to that. Again, I think it's merely a standard and a point of comparison, but not the solution. I haven't been able to convince myself of objective reality to date. So, but at least I know when I'm wrong.
I think just being around a lot of people and collecting a lot of data, really, yeah, it's so valuable to just bounce your thing off tons of people and hear what they're doing. Like, I think about like us, there is really there is an imposter syndrome. My goodness, here, which is all four of us. David's flown first class in places. He's been an important guy and he's done some important things. And it's very easy for me to feel like I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about business when I'm comparing myself to David, but I know David's story. I've seen what David's done, and by virtue of being a facilitator in this group and my group, I've seen just story after story after story unfold. And so I've been able to not say like, oh, I have firsthand experience with everything, but like I've watched some principles emerge, right? And if you want the details so that you can tell if I'm like doing a Malcolm Gladwell and like half understanding a story and making shit up, then I can just connect you with the guy whose story it is, and you can decide what you think about it. But yeah, I think it's tremendous value in just the bird's eye that you can get from listening carefully to lots and lots and lots of stories. And even if like maybe there's like I don't want to discourage people from taking action in the group, but if you are currently lurking and absorbing and just sort of listening in on these calls, I would challenge you to listen actively and don't, if you got to do something with your hands, that's fine, but be present for that and listen to what you're seeing. Including the people who can't seem to get their act together. Like, think about that.
Maybe especially
think about what's going. Yeah. Like do you see yourself in any of that? Because I do, for sure. And I have changed lots of behavior on my end on the basis of seeing myself in people who can't get their act together. And so, yeah, I think there's tons of value in that.
When I'm listening to people, I often write down my own action items, right? Based on a challenge that they're having. I'll see something in myself and go, at the end of the call, I have 5 or 6 action items I've listened the whole time, right? But it's sparked things in me that need to happen this week.
100%.
For the introverts, that process maybe happens differently. I'm speculating, right? Nobody here knows any introverts anyway. So, but I think that's a common experience for extroverts purportedly. I think the broader skill that applies, no matter how you get these self-criticisms, is to have respect for the original purpose. This is oftentimes in self-help delineated for fear, right? Fear has a purpose. It has a goal. My child is afraid of the edge of the stairs. Now, he conquers that every day, but it takes him a little bit in the morning, right? And that's good. I want him to be afraid, and I want him to respect that fear and know that, yes, there's an edge there. There's a cliff. It's the same with some senses of inadequacy. On the extent that you can tie that back to reality, tie that back to an objective sense of who I am, what I am becoming, and who I want to become, I think that you have the ability to transform yourself, which fundamentally is, let's say it lies at the root of being able to take on additional responsibilities. That's not merely business, but it definitely is business. If you've never owned your own business, then you're particularly prone to be a little bit shocked, a little bit surprised. So,
yeah.
Are we wrapping up? Is this the end?
I guess it is now. Geez.
I was letting you hold court. I was.
No, I'm terrible. I don't stick to landings. You know that. I don't stick to landings.
Jeremy will just talk forever and he'll just never land.
Well, no, I just stop awkwardly
he
at
just
the end.
Loves to be there in the clouds, in the sky. It's beautiful.
Right.
To watch him soar.
I know. I get lost.
To me, that is the most difficult thing, is to be able to criticize yourself in a meaningful way. I mean, I feel like it's taken me my whole life to be able to acknowledge my weaknesses to the extent that I have, which is inadequate as far as I'm concerned. And also, maybe you should always be inadequate.
Yeah, like what I hear you saying is like, maybe you've got an inferiority complex because you're inferior,
right? But again, not to others, but your own ambition. And I continually have to reach.
Yeah.
As long as it's drive, right? I mean, drive is great. It comes from a lot of different sources, and I think if that inferiority is a source of fuel, then it's a great thing. If it's paralyzing, then we have to work on it. But if it is a source of if you can throw it in the engine and it works, then throw it in the engine.
Yeah, I think if you're the equal to your ambitions, then your ambitions are probably not as lofty as they could be. And I can't remember if I talked about this on the podcast last week, but I did a little write-up about building a network out of nothing. And the number one thing that I've seen with guys who've built a powerful network is they take on a project that's too big for themselves, because then they have to go ask questions. They have to go figure things out. And I think that applies here. If you have imposter syndrome, like, it's probably the case that you can't do it alone. And that's great, because you're paying to be in a room full of people who can help. And if you need to know how to use that, if you need to know who's in the tent, who has the resources that you need to accomplish your big dream that's too big for you, then you've got these 3 to reach out to.
Uh-oh.
All right. Reach out to me if maybe Jeremy.
Yeah, reach out. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara picks up the slack here.
Start with Barbara.
Yeah. You work
nice.
your way.
She's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
She's so nice.
Very briefly, and this may be a totally another topic. I think we touched on probably the most important thing in terms of personal motivation, personal strength, and the capacity to grow, which is transmutation. I have fun mystic wrappings for this because this is the major consideration in Jung's interpretation of alchemy. So Jung took all the precursor to chemistry, and he said, oh, it's actually all spiritual metaphors. Probably not. I mean, these guys were legit using beakers and flames, and it probably was a little less spiritual than Jung assigned it. But what he says is that you have nothing but rubble and coal and lead. You have difficult materials to work with, and you have tools, and you may not even know all the tools you have. But the very first thing that's going to happen is you're going to go through the fire, the crucible, and you're going to melt whatever you have, and all the dross is going to come off, this putrid blackness, and then it's going to rot, right? And it's going to go undertake all these phases of transformation, most of which are extremely unpleasant before you get what you finally want. We undergo that process of transmutation with pretty much any emotion. If it's inadequacy, lack of confidence, fear, sometimes it's anger, right? We were talking about putting anything that goes into that engine. I've got a guy right now, he's very motivated by anger, and I think that's fine. That's great. But you have to know how to metabolize. And that's the difference. That separates the wheat and the chaff and the sheep and the goats more than anything, is can you metabolize your emotions, which could be perhaps unwholesome or poorly directed, into something that is, for you at least, productive. And I would suggest that your own productivity is tied in deeply into your ability to serve others, because we live in the beautiful world that we do, where we have enough capitalism that you get rich and you become more successful, our broad societal definition of successful, by being useful, by helping others. So again, I think transmutation is a broad topic, but I specifically, I would love to hear everyone's take on that in due time.
I'll say this. I'm a hypochondriac. I always think I'm going to die. And I've been freaking out last couple of weeks. I think it's because of this new baby.
Right.
We just had a baby girl. And I had all this like terror at the thought of not being there for my kids. And I was able to, basically what I did with that was I did a recording for each of my kids, and just how I'm feeling about them right this minute, and what they mean to me and what I'd want them to know if I wasn't around to tell them. And it was this incredibly powerful experience for me. And first of all, just as an ad for that, go do that. If you have kids, tell them how you feel about them, and write it down or record it. I write down a lot, but like to do it in my own voice meant something to me. And I absolutely believe it. Powerful negative emotions are not to be suppressed or discarded. They're to be transformed. They're to be changed into something good. So anyway, that's a weird place to end our entrepreneurship conversation here. But
next week,
Great.
David's going to cry. I don't care what I have to say. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. We're going to get David crying.
Brutally neg David until he weeps.
Oh my God.
It really.
I'm ready. I'm ready for it, guys.
This is not fair to do. It's not fair to do right now because David's sound is so awful. He can't even really fight back.
Right. Even if he were in blurry, if he were crying, he probably is crying.
No.
We don't even know. The self-help component, I think, can seem tawdry, right? And like, oh, you have to process your own emotions and handle yourself in a mature and responsible way, more so than you ever have before. I think this is it's difficult to talk about. And it's mainly just because I have long hair and I'm about 10 to 15 years younger than the average member of the group. I think it is probably the most important set of tools I'd want somebody who is starting a business to walk into it with. you are going to be faced with so many challenges. And if that crushes your relationship with your wife and your kids or something like that, and by the way, I'm still working through that, trying to make adequate amounts of time for my family. I have friends, I had friends, believe it or not. But I don't make time for my friends. I barely squeeze in time for my wife. So I'm always undergoing this. I think we all are. But if you're unprepared for what you're signing up for, and I can warn people, but I think you have to be a more complete person whenever you're owning what you do. You know, you're taking full ownership and responsibility for how you're going to spend most of your life other than sleep. You know, we're talking 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. If you're talking about starting your own business.
Yeah.
And then you're working with people and you're managing those relationships. It takes a very mature person.
And people, I think a lot of, and including myself, before I started this thing, people's hesitation about that is they're like, I actually can't think of anything that I care that much about, that it's worth, that I would put in the work, and therefore I wouldn't put in the work, and therefore it would fail. And so a lot of the exploratory work then is like, all right, who are you really? What do you believe in? What could you give yourself to completely? To the extent that you would be willing. And for me, the reason that I am willing and able to let this thing that I'm doing compete with my wife and my kids for my time is that I am trying to build something for them. And I don't mean like make a lot of money. I mean, I'm trying to build a group of people who really give a shit what happens to my family, and who are and an environment where my wife can have better friends and my kids can grow up around better kids. And that for me was enough for me to say, okay, if I have to be extremely busy while I have this 8-year-old little girl who just has nothing else to do in the world except love me and play with me and wants to just play all the time, and I have to say no to that, it's got to be at least I have to be able to tell her something about that. What's that going to mean to you? And I think not everybody has the same situation as me. I'm going through my process. This is how I was able to convince myself that it matters enough to dominate my attention. And everybody, I think, can do that. And the groups are a great place to chew through that. And like what if it's not a car wash, and it's not a construction company. So what is it? You know, what do you care about? So yeah, anyway, well, any other thoughts before we wrap?
I taught you much, though. I do.
Sorry, I had bad sound.
David.
Apologize.
No,
You're fine.
David, we love you.
Yeah.
Jeremy talked too much. David's sorry.
Even through 16 pixels, this is the face of the man that I fell in love with all these months ago. I can see it shining through.
We're just sad we didn't get more.
I lose pixels every day.
I want high definition straight into the pore, like Journey Inside the Body at Disney World.
The little striations on his iris, the way the color just pops. Yeah, you really have to see it in person. So come to the next meetup, because
that's all you guys do in Exit, though, is to sit around David and stare into his eyes. Like, that's what I've heard.
I mean, if you're lucky, there's a little hand holding.
It's very much like that.
What was that, David?
It's part of the process.
Yeah. Okay.
Please, Barbara, please.
I guess I just want to say, with Kevin, what you just said. First of all, your story about your kids made me cry. I don't know if anyone noticed. I cleared it up, but that's amazing. And I second that everyone should do that. And I love the idea of examining your issues, your fears, being curious about them, exactly like you were saying, not letting them rule your life, but going, okay, what is causing this? And digging into that, leaning into that, and going through it rather than avoiding it. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to say about people who don't know what they care about enough to do what it takes to make a business around something. I was totally there. I totally relate to that. I do love the exploratory phase for people because I've been through it now and I have found what I absolutely love. So I love watching people do that process. And I definitely, I see a lot of that in my groups. I feel like I have probably more of the exploratory people in some of my group calls. So I love to see them trying new things. And I would just repeat how important that process is to keep trying things until you find what you love to do. And maybe it's not a business and that's okay. But that process of discovery is actually, it's just so important. That's going to build you up as a human being and give you more experiences to pull from. That's going to help you connect with people who otherwise you never would have been able to connect with because you looked into their industry at one point and you kind of know something about it. So that stuff is always going to be useful for the rest of your life, whether you use it for that way or not. But anyway, Jeremy, what were you going to say?
I like Kevin's point about convincing yourself. This is not as often acknowledged as I would like. You have to negotiate with yourself to convince yourself to do anything of meaning or import or anything beyond your quotidian work and day and life. If people approach this as a matter of willpower, no, I'm going to will myself to do this thing that I don't want. You need to have bargaining chips to convince yourself to do the things that you want to do. Because the reality is you're not one agent. You are a collection of multiple agents that are all conspiring to do different things. Some of those agents want to eat potato chips and watch TV. Some of those want to change the world tomorrow. Some of them want to just keep doing the same old thing for the sake of security. That's fine. And that's exactly how we all are, right? And one of my agents tells me to eat carbs all the time. Now, that poor guy just gets beaten up. He's beaten up in the back of my mind until at 3 a.m., I'm looking at a granola bar or whatever. So rather than try to fight yourself, which only introduces friction and stress, you have to be able to approach yourself. And hopefully this is a plural, yourself now. English is a little lacking here. With the right ammunition, with the right persuasive arguments, with the compelling, usually emotional reasons why you're doing what you're doing. And I completely agree with Kevin. I almost cry about the kid pestering you to play and then having to deny them. First off, work from home, you get that plenty. And then that becomes the hardest thing you've ever done in your life every day. Hopefully until I'm dead. Well, no, I guess he needs to move out at some point.
But
hopefully for a very long time.
It was the same problem. It was the same problem when I had a desk job. I just didn't get to see it.
Right. And you feel that.
Yeah.
One last thing, maybe the useful aspect of the hypochondria here, which one is a profound transmutation of what I hope is just a paranoid, baseless emotion that compels you into this kind of inner reflectivity. What that means for everybody is a bit of memento mori. And not only do I have little 3D printed skulls back when I didn't break all my 3D printers, and I have multiple that I've broken now, so that's good. But I keep a phrase in Latin, ars longa vita brevis, next to me, behind me, and in front of me at all times to remind myself that what I'm doing better be of import. And what I care about is the impact I have on other people. I want to foster mutually beneficial relationships that are based on love and respect that generate the infrastructure for the world that my children are going to inhabit. Am I doing that? Am I getting distracted? And distraction for me is hardly like YouTube videos, video games, or television. I spent 5 hours implementing a solution that now I don't need because I just found another solution that I just paid $10 a month for. And I just didn't look hard enough. I'm inefficient, etc.
It's amazing how you can transition from the efficiency of laziness to the efficiency of this really better matter. Like this really needs to be, this needs to be better than my alternative, which is for me, my kids. And can't dick around, because it's not worth it. And I would say if, and there's, I have religious backing for all of my, like, why those are my priorities. But everybody's got to figure out like what they're here on earth to do. And I think once you've got that, it's like and I think you're right about integrating. Like if you're disintegrated, if you're pointing in opposite directions, that's where you get the paralysis, right? Because I want the freedom of the business, but I also want the time that I get from my W-2, and a lot of what your facilitator, can point you to some resources on is like what do I really want? What's the end goal for me? And you can also work that out in your calls. You can like talk through it. Like, at least in my groups, I find that like people often will feel like they have to have a project ongoing. And when they don't, they're sort of embarrassed. But I'm like, no, the exploratory stuff is fun. It's like, let's talk about the meaning of your life. Let's talk about why you're doing the thing you're doing right now, and why it sucks, and why it's maybe actually kind of cool. Because if it wasn't cool at all, you wouldn't stay. You'd go join the circus. You'd go be a roughneck on an oil rig, like, why do you stay? And so yeah, definitely. If you don't have that fire under your ass right now, I would say get it through these conversations. Get it through, like, figure out why it matters. Okay, I think, yeah, I got to go. So I think we'll leave it there. This was great. It was great to talk to you guys. This was a lot of fun. And we will see you and everybody else next week.
See you then.
Thank you. See ya.